It's time once again for our winter giveaway. This giveaway is very simple to enter. Be a patron. So the easiest way to enter is go to patreon.com/comicsfunprofit. Become a patron at any level at our Patreon site, and you can do it that way. You can also enter by going to Threadless and buying some merch and tagging us in a photo of you in said merch. So if you like one of our t-shirts or hats or whatever, and you go to comicsfunprofit.threadless.com and find all our merch and like some of it, buy it, wear it. You can either tag us in social with you wearing it, or send us a photo of you wearing it, and you're entered. So those are the two ways: be a patron and buy merch, and then you get entered in our winter giveaway, which is fun swag giveaways of photos and stickers and signed comics, just like our fall giveaway was. And we had 5 lucky winners win stuff in our fall giveaway. So we're hoping to have as many entrants this time that we can give away that many again. So be a patron, buy merch, enter the winter giveaway. Thanks. Check out beacons.ai/comicsfunprofit for all the C4FAP links you could ever need, all in one place. You can provide feedback, listen, support, share, enjoy these. We have our Patreon there. You can buy us a beer or a coffee. You can check out our Instagrams, our Twitters, our Facebooks. Check out our YouTube page. You can email us. You can listen to our podcasts on Patreon, if you're a subscriber, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on Podbean. We have Google Podcasts on there. We have an Amazon wish list. You want to buy Kyle and I something? Fine. You can do that here. We appreciate it. We have Kyle's RPG podcast listed on there, so you can check out his Dork Day Afternoon offerings. We have Cowabunga links, so you can check out the Cowabunga Deep Discount FOC and pre-order list. Get on that. That's RLCS, so you can check that out as well. And we want to just give you opportunities to say hi, to check out what we're doing, support us if you would like, or just listen. Check out beacons.ai/comicsfunprofit for all the C4FAP links you could ever need. Thanks. Back to the show.
Aloha, it's Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing comic book creator, storyboard artist, Gabriel Hardman. He is here to promote his 3-part story that is in the DC anthology series Batman, The Brave and the Bold. Issue 7 is out in stores right now. Issue 8 comes out on December 26th, and he will be, we have a lot in store for this episode. He will be promoting his Patreon page, and Gabriel will be talking about his storyboard work on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. This movie is already out on Disney Plus and is available to purchase, on Blu-ray and wherever you can get digital copies. Gabriel, welcome to the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on. Listeners, I'm just going to go over some of Gabriel's past works. Gabriel and Karina Becco, they did Planet of the Apes for Boom Studios, and they did The Invisible Republic and Green Lantern. Gabriel, correct me if I'm wrong, I know your first artwork you did was on the War Machine series in the mid-90s. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, it was back then it was done under a different name, but yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right. And then you also wrote and drew Kinski. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I have several books out there that I've just written and drawn by myself. The Kinski, the Belfry, a few other things.
Okay, thank you. And then also, too, I also want to point out to listeners, you did a short story in the Kolchak 50th anniversary original graphic novel. Can I ask, can you talk a little bit about your love for Kolchak? That was a great story.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, Kolchak is a lot of fun. It's I think that I didn't as much grow up with it. I mean, I think that I also wasn't the biggest X-Files fan in the world. I like the X-Files, but I think that I first heard about it from Chris Carter talking about it through the X-Files,
Yes.
and then like went back and caught up on it. And Darren McGavin is great in it,
Yes.
and there's just a kind of there's a fun charm to it, especially in those first two like TV movies,
Oh,
and
yes.
but I like the series as well. And really, when the possibility of doing that came up, it just felt like I mean, it was a little after the pandemic, and which I had not had the opportunity to do a lot of comics and for a while.
Mhm.
So doing a story like that, it just felt like a fun, interesting way to get back into it, the kind of story that I could tell, the kind of thing
Mhm.
that I enjoy. Um, it was something. It just sounded like a really fun challenge to me.
So, yes, listeners, if you guys get a chance, if you can track down this original graphic novel, it's a great story. I love it. And there's other stories, short stories by other well-known creators and artists as well. Um, I'm going to go over some of the storyboard artwork that you've done in the past. You've done some storyboard art on X-Men 2, Superman Returns, especially the space shuttle scene,
Hmm.
right? The one where
Yeah.
he's saving him before it crash lands into the
Hmm.
ballpark. I love that scene.
Yeah, that was I mean, those movies that were done with Bryan Singer, it was a interesting situation for me, or just because I was not really I wasn't given a lot of direction by Bryan Singer. So
Mhm.
I was coming on and kind of producing those sequences and presenting them to him.
Mhm.
But in mostly just with the storyboards in X2.
Mhm.
X2, most of what I did in X2, the opening sequence with Nightcrawler and some
Oh
other
my,
things. But the and then on Superman, we
yes.
really there was no script. We had been working on a remake of Logan's Run for months that didn't
Hmm.
wasn't quite working and getting
Yes.
going. Then Singer made some deal to make a Superman movie, and
Yes.
basically just everybody from the Logan's Run movie moved over to Superman like
Hmm.
over a weekend. But there
Yeah.
was no script for Superman,
Hmm.
and so he was going off to write that with the writers, and I was just basically given it's a he has to save a plane with the
Hmm.
space shuttle on it, and they have to
Hmm.
land in a ballpark, and that was it. So uh and there was a little bit of material that had been developed for earlier versions of it that I kind of went through and took good things from.
Hmm.
And so I just had a team of previs artists, the
Hmm.
3D animated previs artists who worked. We developed that whole sequence while they were off writing the script.
Hmm.
That's a little bit why it feels like it's not as much a part of the rest of the movie. I feel like it feels a little different than the rest of the movie,
Hmm.
but we were making the Superman movie we wanted to see.
Yes.
And they
Yeah.
came back with a script that was not so much the movie that I wanted to see. And weirdly though, and I ultimately chose, I mean, for reasons that I think a lot of people know about Bryan Singer these days.
Yes.
I was not so interested in traveling to Australia
Hmm.
and for 9 months with them.
Hmm.
So like I did all this work in LA, and then when they left, I was like, I don't think I'm going to keep going. So the main thing that I did was that kind of set
Hmm.
piece sequence, and then my assumption was because we'd put it all together with music and
Hmm.
stuff and to present it
Yes.
to him. And Brian actually only contributed 2 shots to it that were both insert shots.
Hmm.
But like my expectation was that was just all going to really, I was gone from the show, that was going to change and everything.
Hmm.
Then when I saw the movie, I was like, well, you could run this next to the previous we did. It's the same sequence. So like I mean, I'm not exactly taking credit for it. A whole bunch of people were,
Oh, yes.
involved in it, and that what I was doing is not directing, but like it certainly was the basis for that sequence was what we created while they were
Hmm.
writing.
But Gabriel, I'm going to say, because like you said, like I said, Superman Returns, that space shuttle scene, that's one of the things that just stood out for me, and I love it. X-Men 2, oh my God, that beginning scene with Nightcrawler in the White House. I'm like, holy cow. And that's one of the things I still, and a couple of years ago, when I saw X2 on Disney Plus, I'm like, I'm gonna watch it. I watched that first sequence, and after that, I was like, oh, they're at the museum now. Okay, well, I'll stop.
Mhm.
It's like,
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't seen the movie since it came out. I mean, this is a little bit of a thing for me because I just I put tons and tons of work into these things, and
Mhm,
then and I'm, it's my job, and I spend
mhm.
months on it, and then I'll see the movie when it premieres or whatever. But I feel like I've spent so much of my life with this thing. Like I'm not spending time going back and watching these movies. So
Oh yeah,
like it's been
oh
a
yeah.
long time since I've seen that. Yeah, I mean, those were circumstances where the circumstances of making the films themselves may have been a little bit weird or difficult, but I was like I had the opportunity to just create some stuff. And
Okay, sorry. I'm going to move on because now you were the storyboard artist on some other movies. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, Austin Powers was your first movie that you did. You were the story artist
yes,
for the
that's
whole
correct.
movie.
Yeah. Yep.
Interstellar, if I'm correct me if I'm
Hmm.
wrong,
Yeah.
Inception, Ford versus Ferrari, and Logan.
Yeah. Those are all movies I worked on. I worked on a lot of movies, but
Oh,
those are certainly some of the highlights. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm going to say I love Logan. Um I love it because I mean I know it's a comic book movie, but it felt more like an updated version of Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven. You know, a
Yeah,
man.
it definitely everybody went into it with the intention that it was a Western, that it was
Yeah.
kind of an elegiac Western, that that like it and not really just treated like a, even it's also, but it's in the future. It's,
Yes.
there's a lot of different textures going on there. And I was involved with that, you know, through quite a bit. I mean, there were completely different versions of the script early on when I
Hmm.
when I was working on it. It's something that was being developed the whole time.
Hmm.
Because I came on relatively early. I had actually worked with Jim Mangold, the director, on a film, Deep Blue Goodbye, which is based on a John D. McDonald novel that
Hmm.
Christian Bale was going to star in, but then didn't happen at the very last minute. So
Okay.
and then then the follow-up to that ended up being Logan. And so I ended up kind of working on that from the start. I got along with Jim Mangold. I continue to get along with Jim Mangold.
Yes.
And so like it was an interesting part of the process to that it the way that it developed and the way that it kind of turned into the thing it was.
Hmm.
It was the early version of it was much more of like a 70s conspiracy movie.
Oh. Hmm.
And this like I think where it ended up was the right place for it to.
Yes.
And I was very involved in that. And I was certainly happy, and in any way that I could leaned into
Hmm.
something more like a Western, something more like,
Hmm.
less like a conventional superhero movie of,
Yes. Hmm.
that period anyway. And because I'm honestly like, I mean, if you look at my resume, I've worked on, several key superhero movies, but they don't interest me that much. And it's not
Hmm.
really it's not, as opposed to in comics where I'm taking, uh, something like the Green Lantern
Hmm.
series and able to just create a story that I'm interested in telling.
Hmm.
For the most part, working on storyboards is often a situation where I'm hired for a job and I'm not necessarily not interested in it, and I'm not really interested in most superhero movies. So like
Hmm.
it's like the ones where it's doing something different, doing something
Yes.
interesting like Logan
Hmm.
are certainly what I'm more drawn to.
Yes. I'm going to say, Gabriel, I'm going to say, I understand. I'm going to say, and please, I'm not making a knock at you. I mean, I love superhero movies. I also love how they do. Like I said, Logan is one of the movies. I mean, even though it's based on a comic book character, it's kind of sort of grounded in reality. The feelings, um, you know, their emotions. That's what draws me into Logan. Or I'm going to put out another one that I still love, even though it's Batman's in it, is The Dark Knight. Even though
Sure,
Batman's
sure.
in it,
Yeah,
Joker's in
yeah.
it, but you pull those characters, you take their names out, it's like a crime drama.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, I think that but the thing is, I mean, in a comic, you can get all of that. You can do all of that in
Yes.
a comic as well. I mean, the emotional depth and all of
Hmm.
that
Yes.
stuff. I mean, I think that the problem is not movies where, I mean, The problem, it doesn't have anything to do with superheroes exactly. I mean, I think that the fact that superhero movies are overwhelming, like for the last 20 years
Yeah.
has turned into a problem at this point.
Hmm.
But like I think that ultimately it's just about telling a story about characters. Is this a
Yes.
compelling thing? Is like, not characters in the sense people think of as like a Superman or a Batman or whatever. Are these human beings
Yes.
that, we're telling a story about? And and when stuff succeeds for real in a way that will hold up beyond visual effects and
Hmm.
whatever, you know, uh, you know, see, post credit scenes and all the sort of uh circus part of it, like the thing that makes a movie hold up is the formally the way it's made and investing in.
Yes. Well said. Sorry, I'm going to continue on. Um, Also, one last thing I want to mention. I have to mention this. Gabriel is at times a co-host for some of the Word Balloon episodes that you and John
Yeah.
Suntress do, right? Do you guys
Yeah,
have
yeah.
fun? You,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did it for quite a while. I mean, like the John Suntress has multiple podcasts in his World Balloon world, and during pandemic times, during lockdown times, I was talking on social media about wanting to that I wish I could listen to a podcast about the original Outer Limits TV show because I really
yes.
like that show,
Yes.
and I felt like I wish I knew more about this. I wish
Hmm.
I wish I just had something to listen to while I'm working about it.
Hmm.
And then and then John approached me and he was like, "We should do a podcast about the Outer Limits." And then I was like, "Well, that defeats the purpose of me listening to it." Like I feel like then I'm the one doing all of the work to get this done.
Yeah.
But then I thought, why not? Because things were extraordinarily grim at that time,
Yeah.
and so having some, just being locked in the house with me and the Zeta, my dog, and Margot the cat, and Cash the turtle. It was a little bit. It was getting a little
Hmm.
difficult. So like that, it gave me something to every week we'd record a podcast about the
Yes.
episode. I'd do research on it. I'd,
Yes.
bring stuff to it and have, and generally we'd have a good conversation about it. And I still think that there's a lot of interest in that interesting stuff about that show that has
Yes.
nothing to do with just genre television or comparing it to the Twilight Zone or things like that,
Hmm.
because such interesting people were involved in it and doing
Yes.
things where, you know, they were percolating ideas about,
Hmm.
like, how it was shot and the visuals and
Yes.
and the casts that were in it that would all go on to be really important,
Hmm.
within 10 years in the 70s.
Yes.
So like a lot of that stuff, like the acorn of a lot of the interesting 70s cinema is in that show.
Hmm.
And I wanted to get into all that. So we did every episode of The Outer Limits.
Hmm.
We covered every episode of The Outer Limits. And then we did an even more obscure show about 1950s live television dramas, and we did that for quite a while too, called Kinescope. Those are actually there. I mean, really, I wanted to do that for the same reason. The people who made those live TV
Yes.
shows, John Frankenheimer, who directed Manchurian Candidate and tons of
Yes.
other things. He was one of the greatest live television directors. Sidney Lumet, tons of actors that appeared
Hmm.
in them before they were stars. And I think that it's an enormously fascinating era. So we got to dive into a lot of that, and we've done one-off shows where we just review individuals as well. Sometimes great movies like Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. Sometimes
Hmm. The
terrible,
original
terrible
one, yeah.
movies. Yeah,
Hmm.
the original one, and sometimes terrible movies. Like Skidoo, Otto Preminger's Skidoo. But those have been fun. They're intermittent. We'll occasionally come back and do them. And also, very frequently, Ian Brill would our
Oh,
friend Ian
yes.
Brill would join us on it. Sometimes Jeff Parker, sometimes Andy
Hmm.
Parks, other comics friends and stuff.
Hmm.
So it was always as much as anything though, like especially when multiple people were on, it was great to just have a chance to socialize afterwards. We'd end up talking for hours and hours and hours after we recorded the
Hmm.
podcast.
That's so
just
cool.
because it was not this a lot of this was like before vaccines and stuff even,
Yes.
so like it was a positive thing for a while there. But then, as the world gets going again, John does
Mhm.
his podcast all the time, but like
Yes.
I got other stuff to do.
Yeah.
So I can't, you know.
All right. Um, Let me just finish wrapping. I just want to give a couple of shout outs. I want to give a shout out to John Suntress for having a hand with this episode. So, John, thank you very much. I got some of my information from the IndieCast episode 337 that's dated September 29th, 2023. Mitch Halleck, correct me if I'm wrong, the co-organizer of Terrificon
Yeah.
interviewed you for the Indiana Jones movie that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And also, I got some information, of course, from John's word balloon that's titled Gabriel Hardman Talks Aquaman. That was just it dated December 5th. If you guys get a chance, listeners, if you guys get a chance, please check out these great interviews. I love the interview that you and Mitch did. It sounded like you guys had so much fun doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably because Mitch and John are good friends, and I feel like I know they do podcasts together, so I think
Yes.
that he was ready for my more caustic version of of giving an interview. So it was good.
All right. Now, Gabriel, I'm going to ask, feel free, please promote where can listeners follow you on social media and if you have a
Uh,
website?
I on Blue Sky
Hmm.
currently for the most part right
Okay.
now. I mean, I still occasionally post on the former Twitter just for promotional things. Mostly I'm on Blue Sky, so if you get on there, look for me. And as Gabriel Hardman, I'm Gabriel Hardman Art on Instagram, and I think the same on Threads, if
Hmm.
that's what it's even called. I can barely remember. I'm on there occasionally. The so it's you can find me a few places, and I'm always I'll certainly always promote all the stuff there, and
Yes. Hmm.
then talk about whatever movies that I'm watching at the time.
All right. Now, no pun intended, Gabriel. Let's just jump right into your Brave and the Bold story. It's called Communion. It's a three-part story. What's the story about?
It's an Aquaman story.
Hmm.
It's a sort of like fun, slightly Silver Age tinged Aquaman story. That I wanted to do something, a little bit broader and lighter, since this actually is one of the very few things that I've done that's actually in the like continuity DC
Oh.
universe,
Hmm.
more or less.
Okay.
The Green Lantern books were their own thing.
Yes.
And I've done other stuff there, but this is, and short stories and stuff, and
Yes.
but this is I just wanted to this involves the space alien dominators that
Yes.
that people might remember from an Invasion miniseries in the late 80s.
Yes.
There's and I'd been trying to get dominators into things in the past, but
Hmm.
and it also involves Gorilla City, and these weird disparate elements will come together over the course of these three parts. I mean, the big appeal to me with doing this is I do love doing serialized storytelling. So I like structuring something towards a cliffhanger.
Hmm.
I like leaning into the formal opportunities that it presents. And I pitched Aquaman. I mean, they didn't come to me exactly. I
Okay.
met I knew Ben Abernathy, who's the editor, and now big shot editor over there. And I ran into him at San Diego Comic-Con at a DC party, and
Hmm.
we were talking, and he was like, "Hey, I have this, and I mean, I was saying I would like to do more stuff,
Yes.
and he offered this Brave and the Bold thing, and I really, I like I chose Aquaman to pitch, mainly because I just felt like it's a difficult, it's not the easiest character.
Hmm.
And people don't always have a great way of getting a handle on him, and
Yes.
and I like a challenge. I always want to
Hmm.
do something that's a challenge,
Hmm.
and and I liked the idea of trying to, even though I'm having this go off in different directions, I really wanted to connect, him with, literally with the fish and the undersea world, and in a way where it feels like, even though I open it in a very classic Aquaman way,
Mm-hmm.
confronting people about overfishing,
Mm-hmm.
uh, like and I think that you mentioned something about this to me beforehand, but I just there's a thing where a fish is trying to find him and reaching out
Yes.
to him, and like, yeah, he treats the fish like his friend.
It's
This is the world he's from, right? He's not
yeah.
ruling them, he's of them, and and like and I and I like just I'm something that appeals to me a lot is particularly in adventure-oriented stories, is having characters who just have friends and pals and people that
Yes.
they can rely
Mm-hmm.
on, but also their friendships are tested. That's a little bit less the case with this and
No.
with
Mm-hmm.
Aquaman and a really ugly fish. But and also, look, I like this is an ugly looking deep sea fish, and I like and I always like the idea of not treating characters based on how they look, not
Yeah.
treating, like having it be about,
Yes.
about the actual bonds between, different characters. So, but this is also reflected in in the Dominators, who have a similar sort of look to, right?
Ah.
And and so,
Yes.
like, thematically, these things,
Yes.
even though this is a very goofy little story, I'm always looking for these thematic things that play against each
Yes.
other. And so like and then but in the following two chapters, a lot of this stuff, at least why the Dominators are in this story
Mm-hmm.
and in this undersea facility,
Mm-hmm.
and what gorillas have to do with all of this will become more clear. And like a lot of stories I like to tell, it's about, it's kind of about hubris, and it's about,
Mm-hmm.
about reaching for, like, it I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but it's
Oh yeah.
about it's about a sort of generational divide in Gorilla City that's brought all
Okay.
of this on.
All right. Okay. All right. So listeners, I'm sorry. I know you guys probably want to listen a little bit more about this, about Gabriel's comic, but I want to start moving on to the Dial of Destiny. But before I get into that, Gabriel, I love part one. I mean, I'm back for buying part two and three. I am. I have it.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Thank you. Yeah. And it's funny because, like, the thing that I mean, I've basically always kind of avoided doing a monthly comic,
Mm-hmm.
or a monthly superhero comic, like freelancer monthly superhero comic. I've done monthly comics before, but but because I don't really, I want to tell an individual story. I want to tell something that is, that is not just a part of kind of like a churn of
Yes.
continuity or something like that. But I love the idea of serialized stuff, and
Yes.
I would, there is still definitely part of me that wishes I could just drop into an already going, series, try to make it something
Mm-hmm.
that interests me, and and tell a whole story. But I don't think I'll ever do that. There's a lot of work in a market that's not going that direction. So
Yes.
my focus has always really been on, in the superhero world, on telling contained stories,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
if at all possible, graphic novels. And and so if I do another at DC or whatever, it's likely to be something like that. But I know you didn't ask this question, but I answered it
No, that's okay. It's just thank you very
anyway.
much. Thank you. All right. So I'm gonna start talking about storyboarding and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So you are kind of following the tradition of comic book artists that are working on the Indiana Jones movie. And I'm gonna say I know you must have seen at least a couple of his artworks. Jim Steranko did a number of
Sure.
artworks for Raiders. Oh
Hmm.
my God, those were
Oh yeah, those keyframes he did for it, and I don't know, I don't think he did boards, but
oh yeah.
but I mean the way that I started on indie was working on keyframes, very similar,
Okay.
because it's and that's actually been the process working with Jim Mangold on several of the or on the movies we've worked on, where I will come on at the earliest stage of things
Hmm.
when there's barely a script, if there's one at all,
Hmm.
and just start generating like single image
Hmm.
keyframes that suggest things and
Hmm.
start to develop sequences to a degree and like just put ideas forward
Hmm.
and so that just as a way and also developing a kind of tone. I mean, we all kind of know what the tone
Yes.
of the indie movies was, but we were also making a slightly different indie movie kind of by
Yes.
uh because it had to be like it's not Harrison is going to Harrison was 78 79 years old when he was
Yes.
making the movie, right? It's not going to be like like the earlier Indiana Jones movies, and I actually am I really like the way that the film went. I like the different tone
Yes.
of it. I like,
Yes.
I certainly loved working on the opening sequence, which was just making it as Spielbergy as possible, right? And but like but I did really I do ultimately think that the movie went the right way, and I
Yes.
think it's
Gabriel, I'm sorry. I'm going to ask this because I know you already started to give some ideas of what a storyboard artist do, but
yeah.
so I'm going to ask the dumb question, but can you tell me, for me and listeners, like what is a storyboard artist? What do you do? And also too, you don't work alone. You have to coordinate with other departments in the that people working in the film. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I mean the baseline idea of a storyboard artist is that you're there to create a kind of visual document for the crew, so
Hmm.
that a kind of a visual version of the script that the crew could look at and
Yes.
understand what the director wants. They can
Yes.
understand what equipment to bring on the day. They'll understand
Hmm.
which parts of it are visual effects and which parts are shot live action, all that sort of stuff. The reality of it is a little more complicated than that, at least for me, because I always work directly with the director of the film,
Hmm.
and a lot of the times it's not. I mean, it's very, very rare that I'm getting like a shot list from the director and then I'm just drawing those shots. I
Hmm.
mean, what I'm doing is going in and taking a shot at sequences. Sometimes they're not even written, sometimes
Hmm.
they're just concepts and or I'm pitching a concept of how something can go
Oh,
to the
okay.
storyboards and I'm so I'll just generally I'm taking a shot at it, and if it's with somebody like Jim Mangold, showing it to him, he has a million notes. Then we just start in on it and start
Hmm.
developing it, and I'll but on indie in particular, I was a lot. I mean, a lot of my work was I would take shots at these sequences.
Hmm.
Uh, the sometimes they were fully scripted. Certainly later in the process, they would be fully
Hmm.
scripted. Like in the early days, not so much. And then I would give those boards to the editors. And the editors were, the picture editors for the film.
Hmm.
They won an Oscar for Ford Ferrari, like and so
Yes.
but they all come on very early in the process now because like digital filmmaking has just changed the filmmaking process to a degree that everything is almost happening all at once. Like
Hmm.
the development of the visual effects, the editing, all that stuff is kind of going from the beginning as opposed to
Hmm.
kind of the discrete phases of production that they used to have in the past when everything
Hmm.
was shot on film and a lot slower. So so I'm I'm drawing the boards. I'm giving them to Drew, one of the editors. He's cutting them together. We're getting on a Zoom meeting.
Hmm.
He's running it for me, and then
Hmm.
I'm going, well, no, maybe we should move this here, and what
Hmm.
about
Yeah.
that? And then I'll draw a new, and he'll suggest that something could work better someplace. I'll
Yes.
draw a new board. We put that in. So
Hmm.
we just develop that quite a bit. Then we show that to Jim, the director. He gives a bunch of notes. We go through a million versions of all this, but it's all very collaborative, and it actually was probably a lot more collaborative on indie because a huge part of of the pre-production of this movie happened during the height of the
Yes.
pandemic lockdown. So we were all, you're all available all the time.
Yes.
It's I mean, like where else are you going to be? And so we spent an enormous amount of time,
Hmm.
just interacting over this stuff, meeting over it, going over, different iterations of the sequences. And I mean, in that way, it was a really positive experience for me. I mean, I started on the movie the day before LA shut down. So like it was all that. Like all of my actual work on the movie was just done from home.
Hmm.
And like which kind of sucked because I would have loved to be on set, which
Oh,
I have
yes.
many times in the past on other films. But COVID protocols and everything just made that
Hmm.
impossible. And they
Yes.
shot in England and then
And yeah. Hmm.
in Greece and in Morocco and stuff.
Hmm.
And so like just traveling with the COVID stuff. But even if I traveled there, the COVID restrictions on set would have kept me from ever going on set.
Oh.
So
Mhm.
but that said, it was still, it certainly was still a great
Mhm.
for me to be able to work on and certainly work on through the
Mhm.
pandemic. It was very dark times for me. So like working on that was a really, having something to focus on.
Now I have to ask this one question. I know in the when Mitch was talking to you, I know you know you you're maintaining your professionalism and everything. I'm gonna ask you, who called you to work on this film? Can you?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so it was well, I mean, one of the producers on it,
okay.
Anthony Dixon is who I'm friendly with. We had already been talking because there were multiple projects that may or may not go
Hmm.
at that time. A biopic about Bob Dylan that Jim was working on,
Hmm.
and there was another bigger project too. And so I got a call from Dixon saying, he said, "Hey, are you available? Jim has another project that's going to start going
Hmm.
real quickly, and I can't tell you what it is." And I'm like, "Okay," because I never take things I mean, I
Yeah.
honestly just don't even return phone calls when people act like secrecy so big that they won't tell you what they want.
Hmm.
But like, he's like, "Well, I can't tell you what it is." But it involves Harrison Ford and a bullwhip. And so like and so I was like, oh, okay. And since nobody had heard about this at the time, like
Yeah.
nobody was
Yes.
there's no rumors or anything about Jim doing the Indiana Jones movie. Like it was very much like, all right, I don't know where this came from.
Yeah.
But let me just say, it's nice to I am a huge like Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of my top movies of all time.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's a
Hmm.
movie I saw as a kid, was obsessed with. It's
Yes.
never gotten old for me. And but at the same time, I don't necessarily pursue working on things I'm a fan of.
Yeah.
It's
It's.
that's a
Hmm.
thing that like from the outside
Hmm.
it sounds like, of course, why wouldn't you just want to, work on something that you have this kind of
Hmm.
connection to? The reality of it is often the experience of working on something can burn out your love of something,
That's
right?
true. Oh,
Like,
yes. Yeah.
and like I, for, the possibility of working on the previous Indiana Jones movie
Hmm.
came up at one point, on Crystal Skull.
Yes.
And at the time, I was working with Ben Stiller on Tropic Thunder at the time, and
Oh, yeah.
so it was both. It was also on the Universal lot. I ran into the production designer of Indiana Jones. He asked me if about coming on there to work on it, and I wasn't quite done with Tropic Thunder. I didn't want to
Hmm.
bail on Ben,
Yeah.
but I also didn't really want to work on the movie back then. Like I'd just gone through the experience of working on Spider-Man 3 with Sam Raimi. I loved Spider-Man as a kid in general. That was an incredibly difficult and punishing experience working on that movie. And I didn't want to, and I like kind of never wanted to hear about Spider-Man again at that point, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I did not want to have that same experience with Indiana
Yes.
Jones, right? Like,
That's understand.
I
Yes.
wanted to continue being a fan,
Yeah.
and so I didn't pursue it back then. I didn't pursue working on the fourth movie,
Hmm.
but you know what? When this one came up, and it's you know, lockdown times,
Hmm.
and it was it just seemed like that was the right thing to do, and it was,
Hmm.
it certainly was the right thing to do because I worked on it for nearly 2 years,
Hmm.
and and it got me through the pandemic and everything, and I feel like I came through this still loving Indiana Jones, and still
That's
like
good. Hmm.
still loving those movies. I don't
Hmm.
it didn't kill it.
I have to ask you this question. After you hung up the phone, after you get a call saying, "Hey, there's a movie, Harrison Ford, Bullwhip."
Yeah, yeah.
The movie's titled Sabrina 2.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Um, as soon
But
as you, Mhm.
yeah, no, but go ahead, finish your question.
As soon
Sorry.
as you hung up the phone, what was your reaction?
Well, it just seemed a little, it almost seemed, it seems a little bit surreal, or a little bit like, is this a real thing, and I was excited about it. I was excited about it. Like the only day that I was in the office was going in to read
Hmm.
prior drafts of that
Hmm.
Spielberg had been developing
Hmm.
uh over in the years since Crystal Skull.
Yes.
And and reading those, it was clear that they had just never quite found it, and clearly
Hmm.
Spielberg knew that they had never quite found it, and
Yes.
and he had, he wanted to make the Fabelmans, and that's what, I mean, the earliest production meeting that we had, once the movie was kind of crewed up and really going, was, that Kathy Kennedy basically ran. She was like, Spielberg, that's Steven, wanted to, make the movie, but
Hmm.
that he was passionate about making the Fablemans, and this was the opportunity for him to make it. And at that point, that movie was not announced, and nobody knew about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, it made a lot of sense to me. And honestly, I actually really like the Fablemans. I'm
Hmm.
glad that he made that movie. And uh, so like, but it's it is a weird thing though. When you're working on something, it's very different from being a fan. It's like you
Hmm.
have to put on a level of kind of dispassionate, like probably not using that word correctly, in fact, but like, but you have to kind of distance yourself from stuff. You
Yes.
have to be, and like especially doing what I do, I've found that I absolutely have to be critical of stuff,
Hmm.
not think
Yeah.
about stuff as a fan, think about it as a filmmaker, and think about the effective ways to do things. And there are many fanish sort of things that could, that were possibly going to be in the movie, and if it didn't seem like it was serving the story, I
Hmm.
was always against it, because like I
Yeah.
think that it's, the important thing is to be telling a story, and telling a story that people aren't just enjoying because it has references to things they remember in the past. It has to be working on its own terms, and that's the way
Yes.
I always approach.
Oh, thank you very much, Gabriel. Thank you for that. We're slowly wind we're mm, I'm going to start slowly wrapping this portion up, and we'll start talking about your Patreon. I have to ask you, what was the experience like at the premiere? Because I know on Twitter you're posting pictures.
It was great. It was great. The premiere was great. You know, the we had pretty good seats up towards the front. The me and my girlfriend Renelle,
Hmm.
and like the Harrison and Spielberg and George Lucas come
Hmm.
out, and Kathy Kennedy, and they're
Hmm.
like, and they're out to introduce the movie, and then they're like, oh, but wait, here, we have this first, and like the curtains rise, and John Williams is there conducting a full orchestra, and like it was beautiful. It was just a beautiful thing to experience, and it was great seeing the film for the. I mean, I'd seen the film before. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
seen it actually different times at different stages
Hmm.
throughout the editing and sound mixing, but like it was great to see it just on a big screen, and it played well in the room, and I do think the movie and the
Yes.
and the and then at the after party it was just it's the everybody's hanging out, and it's um Sala is talking to Short Round, and
Mhm.
and then I finally got a chance to meet Harrison, which was great because I was never on set,
Yes.
and obviously I don't know if you know this, but he was Indiana Jones and he
Yes.
was Han Solo, and he was certainly the guy from my childhood. And so it was great to meet Harrison. It was a particularly Harrison-like experience to
Mhm.
to meet him. It was good to finally get a chance to talk to the guy and meet him and everything, especially after doing some.
Off the cuff question, because like you said, when you saw Raiders in these theaters as a little kid, what Gabriel Hardman now, if you can go back in time, tell that little kid, what would you tell that little kid after he comes out as Raiders of the Lost Ark? What would you tell him?
Well, I think I don't have any idea. Like, I think that I would tell that kid to go to USC Film School, regardless of its value, which I don't think it has much. The only value it has is that it gets you someplace,
Mhm.
and so like I think that I would have, I never would have been able to afford it. I didn't grow up with any
Yeah.
money, but like I think that I would have uh, told them to focus more on, doing what he could to get in the film business in a way that was more conventional,
Mhm.
because it would help in the long run. Because I knew that I wanted to be a filmmaker from then, from
Mhm.
like
Yes.
or at least very soon after that, when I kind of realized that it wasn't so much archaeology I was excited about as the filmmaking,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
so and Raiders is just a great movie that
Yes.
bridges being, very broad entertainment, but very brilliant filmmaking.
Yes. That's the perfect segue to my next question. Excuse me. Did you buy the book, The Making of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, when you were a kid?
I don't believe that I had that book, actually.
Okay.
I had because they're just I didn't you know I didn't always have access to a lot of stuff like that.
Mhm.
I mean, I lived in small towns for the most part growing up. Although, when I saw the movie, we lived in Northern California, but when we'd go to San Francisco,
Mhm.
but like we didn't have all the money in the world. I didn't have all the access in the world to
Mhm.
stuff. So, apart from having the Raiders of the Lost Ark storybook, I don't remember having a lot else.
Mhm.
And although I did collect the toys
Oh
that
yes.
briefly existed.
Mhm.
And but Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm a huge, huge Star Wars fan, and
Yes.
Star Wars has always meant a lot to me. And I've also kind of avoided working on Star Wars. We'll see if
Which
that can continue or not. I don't know.
yeah.
And the but like I but certainly, I don't know, there's just something special to me about Indy and Raiders in the sense of like
Mhm.
scope and adventure, and the way
Yes.
that it's the filmmaking in Raiders in particular is superior to the filmmaking in the Star Wars movies, even as much
It
as I love it.
yeah.
And it's that innate ability that Spielberg has, make you see what you want to see
Mhm.
and express emotion at the same time.
Now this is going to lead to my next question. I don't know which comic book publisher has the rights to the Indiana Jones, but if someone calls you, go, hey, would you like to do a 5-part Indiana Jones miniseries? You
I
have a
think it's
story.
highly unlikely now. It would be Marvel because
Okay. Yeah.
because it's Lucasfilm, and so it's
Yeah.
owned by, I mean, unless they license it to somebody else. But this was something that actually, while we were working on the movie, I brought up the idea of me doing an indie miniseries that would maybe be like a prequel to it, set during World War II, to Jim Mangold while we were working on it. Jim's response was, you spent all this time on Indiana Jones, and you want to spend like months more working on Indiana Jones, and but not that, I mean, I don't think it was, not that that meant it was off the table to do it. That was his personal reaction. But like and I actually reached out to an editor at Marvel Comics about this, and who would have been the editor responsible for it. And so a little bit of maybe too much inside comic books here, but that company is not the greatest a lot of the time. And so I while this is somebody that I'd been friendly with in the past, on this particular thing, I got no response. So it's not like I didn't try to make it happen. I
Oh
actually
yeah.
did try to make it happen. I actually was something that I would have liked to do. At this point, it's fine that I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about those kind of things either
Oh yeah.
way. But it was something that I made an effort to do. And I'll tell you, I could do a really good Indiana Jones comic. Everybody thinks it's not something that could,
Hmm.
that works in comics. I could do the version of it. I guarantee you.
I know.
But it's not going to happen. So, don't worry about
Well,
it.
let's because we kind of talk about movies. I'm sorry because I'm not too much of a movie buff, but it's like that James Bond title, Never Say Never.
Yeah,
Who knows?
sure. You never know.
But
I mean, I don't think that there's the appetite currently,
yeah,
but
yes, that's I think
like,
that's the thing.
and I don't think there's ever been an appetite for indie comics because they've just never been that successful.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I would pick up those Marvel
Oh yes.
indie comics, and they were okay. They were fine, but I never felt like I was getting a comparable experience out of it.
Yes.
And that's, I used to do, some, Star Wars comic and the Planet of the Apes books you mentioned and stuff.
Yes.
And the idea with those was like, tell a story that's a compelling story, but also make it feel like the world of that, make it
Yes.
feel
Hmm.
the tone be,
Hmm.
recognizable as the world of the thing you're setting it in. So often licensed comics, just because in a lot of circumstances, they don't pay well, or there's a lot of interference from rights holder.
Hmm.
They end up just not being great comics. But my experience had always been with the Apes comics, with the Star Wars comic, and with the Alien comic I did. I did
Oh
an
yes, that's
Aliens,
right.
wrote and drew a comic, Aliens Dust to Dust,
That's
for
right.
Dark Horse. That which is currently available in the fourth Marvel Aliens omnibus
Hmm.
that's out there. That like my intent is like make this feel like you're getting another entry in that world, right? Like
Yes.
something that
Hmm.
feels like that world. And I absolutely think that I mean, I'm made to do that with Indiana
Hmm.
Jones, right? I mean, but look, I worked on the movie. I put a lot into those sequences. If there's anything that I feel like I'm kind of made to do, it's figure out Indiana Jones action sequences. So
Hmm.
but I'm also a writer, and I also would have loved to do a comic.
Gabriel, thank you very much for talking about that. I'm going to ask, okay, promote your Patreon page because you are going to also have a crime noir, um, kind of sort of like a newspaper strip called
Yeah.
Below the Line. Please feel free to talk about your Patreon page.
So this is just me doing something that I'm personally excited about doing. I've never like while I've done lots of particularly sci-fi
Yes.
oriented comics, I've one of the things that I love the most are film noir and the crime genre in particular. And I've never really gotten the chance to do that kind of thing in
Mm-hmm.
comics. And so I just kind of set out to do something that was exactly what I wanted to do on
Mm-hmm.
my schedule,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and just the way I've approached creator-owned comics in general, certainly with Kinski, with the Belfry. I just made the book first before approaching anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Okay.
made
Yes.
the book I wanted to make, and then with the Belfry, I just wrote and drew a 22-page comic. I finished it. It was ready to go to the printer.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote to Eric Stevenson at Image Comics and was like, hey, I made this one shot. I don't know if Image puts out one shots or not, but
Mm-hmm.
it's done and ready to go. And he was
Yes.
like, great, let's do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I'm all about not asking for permission for
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
So like particularly in comics where unlike in films, which cost millions of dollars no matter what you do, in comics, I can do the whole thing. So
Yes.
like my intention was to make this tell the story whether on my own, right,
Mm-hmm.
without getting permission first. But I but lately had gotten very much into reading newspaper comic strips from like the 30s and 40s,
Mm-hmm.
50s a little bit, and really inspired by this very different form. And the form of telling a story in a newspaper strip style is radically different
Yes.
from a 22-page comic or a
Mm-hmm.
120-page graphic novel. And I just really loved the idea of the challenge of that.
Mm-hmm.
And also the story I'm telling is about 1947 Hollywood, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a crime story set in that world, and it just felt so right to be a comic strip, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Even though the content of it is not necessarily, gonna, it's nothing, a lot of it's nothing you could run in a newspaper in the
Oh
40s,
yes.
but
Mm-hmm.
uh, that I liked the idea of that. I liked the challenge of that, and so I just decided that I was gonna the initial version of it. I would just, as I worked on it, I would put it on Patreon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my Patreon is like my Instagram. It's Gabriel Hardman Art,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll and in the end of January, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
start posting the comics. I need to do enough to get a little bit ahead, and it's basically going to be seeing me work on the first, and eventually this will come out as a book, right?
Yeah.
Eventually this will be a graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
But like because I can the way that I am the way that I'm structuring the strip, I'm also thinking of it in a way that could be reformatted for
Mm-hmm.
traditional comic page. So like it will ultimately it'll be that, but this is a chance to see me work on the thing
Mm-hmm.
as it goes, read it as a serial as it goes, and but also when I launch the Patreon, I'll be posting storyboards from films.
Nice.
I'll post
Mm-hmm.
Indiana Jones storyboards. I'll
Mm-hmm.
post pages of comics nobody's seen before that never got
Yes.
published. I have projects that you know that's currently projects that will never be finished, like
Mm-hmm.
Invisible Republic, but there's some work on it that I did
Mm-hmm.
that I'll publish. There's I have half of a graphic novel called The Crooked Man
Mm-hmm.
in 1906 San Francisco that for several reasons didn't happen, but so things like that, and ephemera from movies I've worked on, and old storyboards and whatever. So like there'll be a lot of stuff. There'll be a kind of basic tier where you get all that other stuff with the storyboards and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
then there'll be the slightly higher tier where you get the noir comic.
So cool. Gabriel, thank you very much. I'm going to ask two more questions because we're out of time, but I'm going to ask
Sure.
you this. Have you and your family been to Hawaii?
I've only been to Hawaii once. I was in Kauai like
Oh,
10 years
that's.
ago, more than that, probably
Mm-hmm.
15 years ago. So
Yeah.
it's been quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'd certainly love to go back.
Last question. Any closing words to our listeners?
I just hopefully hopefully you just enjoyed the discussion here. Like that's my word to the listener.
Mm-hmm.
But also, by all means check out my Aquaman story and Brave and the Bold
Yes.
number 7 to 9, and keep a lookout for this Patreon. I think it's going to be an interesting experience for people, and I'm pretty proud of the work done.
Mahalo. Thank you in Hawaiian. Just Gabriel, thank you for your time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview you. I wish you continued success as a storyboard artist. It sounds like you have a lot on your plate. You have people calling you. That sounds great. I wish you continued success with the Brave and the Bold stories. And also your Patreon page. I wish you success with that. I want to again give a big shout out to John Suntress of Word Balloon. John, thank you very much. Now, if you are a new comic book reader or a lifelong comic book reader, please check out Gabriel's Aquaman 3-part story that is the Batman and the Brave and the Bold. Part 1 is issue 7 is out in stores right now. Part 2, that's going to be in issue 8, will be out on December 26th. I love part 1. I've got the rest of the story, rest of the issues on my pull list already. What I love about this, it shows that Aquaman has a real personal relationship with not just the big fishes like whales or schools of fish, but it shows that he had that individual relationship with that one fish. You have to read the story. I loved it. It was a great scene. I really did.
Right. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. And and also too, Gabriel, I'm being serious on this part. Listeners, if you have a friend who loves comics, please pick up this Batman anthology issue 7 to 9 and give it to them as either as a belated Christmas present or a Christmas present. I love this anthology series. It gives spotlights on some of DC's lesser known characters, or some characters that, like Aquaman, will have his own series for a little while and then he kind of drops out of sight for a little while. Or the other thing I love is that in issue 7 they have Wild Dog. And I have to show you this, Gabriel. I bought this because I saw Kyle Starks. I was like, oh my God, I love the Wild Dog miniseries in the 80s.
Yeah, that was definitely, that was, I think that made an impact on a lot of people back then. I certainly remember it.
And also, to listeners, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, again, is currently on Disney Plus. I love this film because I love the mood of the film. It's very different from the other films. I love it because it just shows Indiana Jones literally that, his adventure days are over, but yet his life still continues on. It's kind of nice about how it kind of shows a nice chapter of how one chapter ends for him and another one begins. Also, too, please keep an eye out for Gabriel's Patreon page. Gabriel, I'm being honest. I am really looking forward to checking out Below the Line. I really am.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Great. I want to thank Drew, the Close-Up Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together. Drew, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys. Aloha.
Our LCS is Cowabunga Comics, Lake Country, Wisconsin's best pop culture destination for new comics, back issues, gaming, retro video games, vinyl, and figures. Give them a call, 262-569-9999. Check them out online at cowabungacomics.com, or follow them on Twitter at Incredicow. They are our LCS, and we utilize their deep discount mail order service to bring Oconomowoc, Wisconsin closer to us. They'll take care of you. Tell them Drew and Kyle sent you. Say hi to Eric and James from us. If you need an LCS, you can't go wrong with Cowabunga Comics.
In a world ravaged by war and chaos, a group of survivors must band together to brave the dangers of a post-apocalyptic landscape. The year is 2000, and the world has been plunged into darkness. The nuclear fires have burned out, leaving behind a wasteland of ruins and radiation. But amidst the rubble and despair, a glimmer of hope still remains. Join Dork-Day Afternoon as they face off against marauding gangs, enemy soldiers, and even the harsh elements themselves in the world of Twilight 2000. Will our heroes survive the challenges ahead? Can they keep their own humanity intact? Or will they succumb to the harsh realities of life after the end of the world? 2 Past Midnight, an actual play podcast by Dork-Day Afternoon.